Let's talk about some nutrients of concern during pregnancy. And the very first one we're talking about is folate. Folate is a B vitamin that is very important during pregnancy because it's necessary for rapid cell division. A minimum of 400 micrograms is necessary for any woman who is able to become pregnant. Once pregnancy is confirmed, it goes up to 600 micrograms a day. It is very crucial for DNA synthesis, cell division, and of course the prevention of neural tube defects. We know that neural tube over here is being formed by at least day 28 of pregnancy, and that's not very long, guys. Many people or many women do not know that they are pregnant by fourth week of pregnancy. Without having enough folate, she is also susceptible to macrocytic anemia. Remember that folate and B12 both can cause macroanemia. And so that is another concern when it comes to all the types of repercussions related to anemia. Sticking with B vitamins, now the next one is B12. Now, I don't want you to know the RDA for this one, but I want you to know or remember at least that B12 and folate do have a partnership. So B12 is necessary in order to activate folate. Therefore, if B12 status is too low, you're not going to have folate working like it should. It is also necessary in order to prevent that macrocytic anemia that we looked at in the previous slide. If you don't have enough, you're going to have impaired fetal growth, problems with the brain development or cognitive development. The next question or a little bullet point asks you, what are those sources of B12? So take a second, see if you can recall what those are. And those are sources of animal products. B12 is only naturally found in animal products or fortified foods. Therefore, those who are at risk are usually vegetarians or vegans. We have talked about iron over and over. We know that iron is one of the most common nutrient deficiencies worldwide, and especially during times when you need more. You see, it's a 50% increase during pregnancy, and that takes women's needs from 18 milligrams a day to now 27 milligrams a day. You can obviously see how this would be a problem since the majority of women are not meeting that 18 milligrams a day. We need this in order to synthesize hemoglobin. That hemoglobin is necessary for transporting oxygen and nutrients and disposing of waste. In order to prevent iron deficiency anemia, we need to make sure that we have enough iron on a regular basis. Where do we get good sources of heme iron? Of course, that's red meats, but we get non-heme sources in green leafy vegetables, legumes, fortified foods, and supplements. Without enough iron, you have an increased risk of low birth weight infants, having a preterm delivery, or a baby with impaired cognitive development. You might recall this particular picture, or at least some of the pictures on the screen, when it comes to having iodine and its necessary function in the production of thyroid hormones. If a woman is deficient during pregnancy of iodine, it could increase the risk of having a baby with a lower IQ. This is congenital hypothyroidism and also that goiter that you can see in the picture. And this is cretinism. Remember, that is kind of the suppression of growth. You have some physical abnormalities here and a decreased IQ. Where do we get iodine? That's in seafood, dairy, iodized salt, not sea salt, and processed foods that have salt in them. Majority of our foods, or at least our iodine intake, is usually going to occur from iodized salt. One may assume that when growing, another human body within them would require additional calcium. But in fact, the RDA for calcium during pregnancy does not increase. It remains at 1,000 milligrams a day. We need, of course, calcium in order to have strong bones and teeth, but during pregnancy, our body makes this amazing adjustment to be able to absorb calcium more efficiently and also to be able to extract calcium from our bones more efficiently. So, regardless of what mom eats, the calcium is going to come from her bones, but after pregnancy, especially if she breastfeeds, that calcium will be restored. Vitamin D does not increase as well. We still need the same amount, 15 milligrams a day. Unfortunately, most women are not actually getting that amount at all. So, we need to make sure we're at least meeting those minimum requirements. Of course, we cannot absorb calcium unless we have vitamin D. Therefore, it's a very common supplement we tend to receive during pregnancy, especially if we live in areas with low sunlight or we cover up our skin the majority of the time we are outside. Another common myth that I want you to be able to understand and tell the truth about is the fact that women who are pregnant can have sugar substitutes, things like saccharin equals Splenda, sweet and low. All of those are normally completely safe during pregnancy. There's only a couple of incidents where a woman should not have those during pregnancy, and that's if she has a particular allergy or maybe she has PKU. That's that phenylketonuria genetic syndrome. But otherwise, she's free to have some. Of course, that is all in moderation. You can always exceed those upper thresholds. It's just not very likely to have. So please, if you're asked a true or false question, are sugar substitutes like sweet and low, which is known as saccharin, is equal, which is aspartame, or Splenda, which is sucralose. Are those safe during pregnancy? Absolutely so, as long as she's having those in reasonable amounts and not having maybe 28 packets or 16 sodas a day or diet sodas a day. We're still talking about the nutrient needs during pregnancy, and I want you to know that we don't change in the calorie recommendations until the second trimester. Very important to know. During the first trimester, that little embryo is so tiny, it receives all of its tiny amount of recommended calories from breaking down that uterine lining. Mom does not have to actually eat any more than she normally does. In the second trimester, it does begin to start to increase up to 340 calories extra a day. It sounds like a lot, but in general, this little small amount of food would be suffice. Of course, we tend to usually just have a greater appetite during pregnancy, so we tend to also eat larger portions and not have to necessarily worry about having a special extra snack. Of course, it goes without saying, we want those snacks to generally be a very nutrient dense snack, providing some of those nutrients of importance during pregnancy, like calcium, vitamin D, folate, etc. But that doesn't say that she can't have some of those as being ice cream too. We need a minimum of 175 grams of carbohydrates a day. Before pregnancy, for adults, it's 130 milligrams a day. So you can see that we're going up a little bit. Protein needs also increase and goes up to 71 grams of protein a day as just being the general RDA. Remember, this is general, the minimal amount that is necessary to make sure that all metabolic processes are able to continue like they should. Doesn't mean that you might not need additional amounts of protein under certain circumstances.